Um, all right. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. We'll walk through, just obviously we have our virtual meeting protocols, which everyone knows, mute yourself, but feel free. I mean, you guys know the drill. It's pretty small, so feel free to unmute and have a conversation at any point. We're gonna do introductions really quickly, and then we'll start diving into the topic. There we go. Thank you, Jessica. All right, so if you can share your name, where you're located, the successes and accomplishments, any that you'd like to share for you or your family or your community or all of the above. So I'm just gonna let whoever wants to go first unmute. I won't call you out.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go for it.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Ort. I'm located in Ocean Shores, Washington, currently. We just adopted a child last month who used to be a foster child of ours. His overall goal was to be adopted by us, and he finally got it done.
Oh, that's exciting, James.
Thank you. Yeah, he loves it.
I bet. You're getting thumbs up. I saw Lena give you a thumbs up.
Thank you.
Oh, hearts. Thanks for sharing that.
I can go next. My name is Nikki Helgeson. I'm in Puyallup, Washington. And a recent success, I have 4 kids. 3 of them actually graduated. My son graduated high school. My oldest daughter graduated middle school, and my 5-year-old graduated kindergarten. And it was hectic. And I'm just glad that everything's over. And now we're in summer.
Those are big accomplishments. Thanks for sharing, Nikki.
All right, I'll go. Alina Swart, Clarkston, Washington, where it's 103 degrees today. And our accomplishment is we finally own our house. We finally got to sign the papers on it, and it's going through the escrow company and everything. Finally, it's taken 8 years to get to this point. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yay, that's so exciting. Congratulations. Who else would like to go?
I'll go. I'm Stephanie Reed. I live in Arlington. We all got some kind of sickness that wasn't COVID, and we're now healthy. So that is an accomplishment because it was rough for a little bit.
Oh. At least you're healthy for the summer, hopefully.
Yes.
I can go. This is Whitney Storr. I live in Linwood. I'm calling in from Portland tonight. We're on vacation. Our big accomplishment, we took my son out of state for the first time this last week. We have an RV and we took him camping, which has been really, really hard because of all of his medical stuff, but we managed to do it. And so that was a big accomplishment for us.
Aww. Yay, thanks for sharing, Whitney. And thanks for calling in on your vacation. Who else?
I can go next. My name is Emily Morgan. I'm with the DCYF Community Engagement Team. I'm located in Spokane, and an accomplishment for me is next week I will be in the 3rd trimester of my pregnancy. So I'm very excited about that. And related to that, my back is hurting very badly today. So I am joining from bed. So I'm not going to be on camera today, but I'm excited to be here with you all. I always enjoy this group. So it's nice to be here.
Thanks, Emily. Laura, I see your comment in the chat. No worries. Feel free to chime in when you get back home. Oh, Christina, you just joined. Did you want to share? I don't know if you're, I can't hear it. Oh, there you are. Do you want to, Christina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Sorry, I was muted.
No worries.
Am I saying who I am and where I'm from and any successes? Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep, we're just doing intros. You're right.
No worries. My name is Christina Cummins. I am located in South King County area. Successes. So far, we've survived the summer and the heat. I know it's only July 12th. We're about halfway there and go back to school. But yeah, I think that's our like just spending more time together as a family and doing more things as a family, like movies in the park and going hiking, stuff like that. So just surviving this heat all together as a family and staying sane while doing all of it.
That is important. Who else? How about Jessica Hurtline?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Hurtline. I'm with the DCYF Community Engagement Team, located out of Spokane. I'm looking forward to something. I'm going on a new hike this weekend. I haven't been hiking in a while, so it might be rough, but I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks, Jessica. Jenny?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm at the grocery store. I'm just walking to my car. So I am Jenny Olmstead. I am with DCYF, and I am located in Olympia. And I don't know if this counts as a success or accomplishment, but we just got over hand, foot, and mouth, which I've never experienced before. But all is well, and we're healthy, so that's good. I consider that a win.
That is no fun. So I would consider that as an accomplishment. All right, let's see. So I'm Deanna Stewart, located in Pierce County. You know what? I don't know any successes or accomplishments. I have a lot going on in my personal life right now. So yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping to just like get through July smoothly. I guess that's a hopeful success and accomplishment. So we'll see if that happens. All right, so the next intro part, we have a question that we just like to share. So if you're unable to click on the link that Jessica's going to put in the chat. So as a child, like what was your favorite book or story? There's a link in the chat that you can click on and it'll share and you can type it in and it'll come up on the screen. Also, if you're more comfortable to just unmute and share, that's totally fine.
I'll share. It's easier for me to unmute than type. Growing up, my dad always read us the Chronicles of Narnia, and so that's always been one of my favorites. All the books, but yeah.
I love that movie. Okay, whoever typed in Love You Forever. So I have that book for my kiddos and oh my gosh, makes me want to cry every time I read it to them. All right, we only have 2 people, 3 people have shared. Oh, there we go. So anyone else want to share, unmute and
Yeah.
share anything? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how to write on this thing yet. I'm still working on it.
No, you're fine, Jade.
So my favorite movie when I was a kid was Transformers, the 1980 version.
We were just talking about that, like how 80s had the best cartoons and the best shows and
Yeah, I
It's a,
still enjoy it now.
yeah.
it didn't let me put enough books. I also had the Nancy Drew series. I had the horse racing series that I used to read. I would run out of books pretty quick.
All right, well, thanks for sharing, everybody. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to, oh, wait, Christiana, I see you. You want to, oh, and Tiffany Yvonne. Do you guys want to do introductions? Just name where you're from, and then like any successes, accomplishments, what's going on with you, your family, your community, all of the above. And then what your favorite book or story was or movie as a child.
Okay, Christiana from Everett. Success is I helped with a what do you call an op-ed about the capital gains tax. Another success is I put on my graduation, prom, and senior trip for my school for my students, and it went down without a hitch. And I heard because I invited the parents to prom and everything, and to all the activities. One of the best compliments I got was that they've never seen their kids so happy, and so that made them happy and act like real kids. And my favorite childhood story was a story about grief, and it was called Grandpa, Me, and the Wishing Star.
That's all exciting information and happenings, Christiana. Thanks for sharing it. I did a little celebratory reaction for you. I don't know if you saw it. Tiffany Yvonne.
Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. today I'm actually in Seattle. So I am between Washington and Oregon. This is where my life takes place this past year. Successes, I think one of the things that's really resonating with me is just navigating summer with my wonderful kiddo in my life, because summer can be intense trying to plan everything out and managing multiple schedules, getting things like just camps by themselves. So that's like my huge success, that things are moving along smoothly and Genki is doing things that he's really excited about and he's interested, and seeing that little joy in his eyes. Like, it's like, okay, mom, you did a good job. So I'm having that moment. And then I think beyond that, just it's interesting being kind of at this place as my child gets older and allowing myself more spaciousness to start thinking about, like, what does that transition look like for me? And so I'm giving myself those years ahead to start planning for that, because I only have one child, so it'll be a big shift because we're so super close, but it's an opportunity for me to start, thinking about what does my relationship with myself actually switch when I'm out of that very active phase of parenting. And so that's kind of exciting for me. He's already let me know he plans on living out of the country and he wants to go to college abroad. And I'm like, okay, I got 7 years to start preparing for all this financially. But so that's my successes. And then books, I don't know if I have a favorite book. I am a prolific reader and I've always have been. When I was a kid, I read nonfiction probably for the first until 4th grade, because I thought reading fiction books was silly. Why would you want to read about stuff that wasn't real? And I got into fiction because I ran out of all the nonfiction books in the library because I'd read them. And he's like, well, sorry, you'll have to learn to read fiction. So I guess I like the TV show with Miss Frizzle, The Magic School Bus. Because when I think about myself, I was like, yeah, it would have been cool to have been Miss Frizzle. She had all these cool adventures. So yeah, I'll go back to The Magic School Bus.
That's a lot to be pondering, Tiffany. Like what your life is going to look like in 7 years. That's a lot. I mean, it's a good thing to think about, honestly. I mean, especially with kiddos and them leaving the nest. It's hard because we get so wrapped up in who we are with our children and for our children. So, all right. Okay, I am going to turn it over. Let's see, I'm going to make sure nobody else has joined. Okay, yep, everyone's here. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily and she'll start us, kick it off to, for those of you that don't know, she's not on camera because her back's starting, so and she can share. I know she's unmuted, but she's lying down, so she didn't want you to see her like that.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I would normally like to be on camera, but I am propped up in bed and it is not, yeah, it's just easier if I'm not on camera for this. But I will be looking forward to being on camera next time. So today we're going to go over some recommendations that some providers from the FSKA Temporary Licensing Subcommittee have come up with. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you, Jessica. So a little bit of background on the Temporary Licensing Subcommittee. It is a subcommittee of ELAC, the Early Learning Advisory Council. And the language that is up here is actually a part of the statutory language that created the Fair Start for Kids Act, and it also created the Fair Start for Kids Act Temporary Licensing Subcommittee. And the overall goal of the subcommittee is to submit recommendations on how to improve the overall statewide licensing process. So to do that, the subcommittee needs to examine strategies to increase the number of licensed childcare providers including meeting with licensees to explain their requirements and inspect and then provide feedback on the space that is contemplated for licensure, develop model policies for licensed childcare providers to implement licensing standards, including completing the childcare and early learning licensing guidebook, and develop recommendations regarding incentives and financial supports to help prospective providers navigate the licensing process. So we began meeting as a subcommittee in January of this year. And before the end of the year is up, sometime in early fall or in mid-fall, the subcommittee will be submitting recommendations to DCYF on how to improve the statewide licensing process. And so since January, we've met 9 times. On our distribution list, we have 70 providers, and that includes some family home providers, some family friend neighbor providers, and the majority of the group are licensed childcare providers. I think I said we had about 70 on our distribution list. At a typical meeting, we have about 50 to 30 providers, so we don't have 70 showing up at every single meeting. And the majority of the meetings that we've had so far have been dedicated to different presentations on different parts of the licensing process. So these have been led by members of DCYF staff with different programs. And we can go over the presentations that they've had. They had a presentation on the DCYF licensing division organizational structure and scope, the licensing processes overview, the licensing checklist, the early learning guidebook, the licensing division investigation process, inter-rater reliability, the Child Care Development Fund, merit, and the Washington Compass provider portal, communications and social media, and background checks. And after the background check presentation, the subcommittee did already submit one part of their recommendation on background checks, but today we wanted to bring to you some of their recommendations that are more related to parents. And that is also part of the statutory language too, that this work needs to have some parent input. So that's why we are bringing it to you today. And we're actually going to collect some feedback using Jamboard. So you can go ahead and drop the Menti slide for now. Thanks, Jessica. And we will share a Jamboard on the screen and show you some recommendations that the providers have come up with and just get your feedback on what the parent perspective is on these recommendations and whether you agree or disagree with the recommendation and what you see as helpful or not helpful to parents. So you guys can just feel free to unmute, or if you are unable to unmute, you can enter in the chat. We'll read out the recommendations, and then whatever feedback you have, Jessica will do this. We'll use the sticky note function on Jamboard to enter it onto our board here. If you also want to put, I can actually put the link in the chat. I'll put the Jamboard link in the chat as well. I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm so out of breath. So if you would prefer to put your own note on the Jamboard, you're welcome to do that as well. So the link is in the chat, but we can also just have more of an informal conversation. So our first recommendation is around increasing translation and language access. And it says all licensing materials are released in English, Spanish, and Somali, and non-English speaking providers have the same access to information, webinars, or meetings as English speaking providers.
So I just want to pause really quick. Does anyone have questions about the temporary license subcommittee or why we're coming to you all to ask for feedback? All right.
Thanks, Jana. I should have checked in about that before I just jumped from the presentation to the
No,
Jamboard.
you're totally fine. And then if this one, also keep in mind, some of these, we pulled ones, these are the recommendations that after they've received a bunch of presentations from staff, they've come up with, and they want to provide these recommendations to the agency. So what we're asking is like, one, does this relate to parents at all? If it doesn't, and it's relatable to just providers and you don't have an opinion on it, we can just say like, does not apply, and we'll move on to the next one. So feel free to say that, because if you see it and you're just like, why am I looking at this one and this has nothing to do with me, then feel free to say that, because there probably are gonna be some that might feel like that for you. But we wanted to bring as many as that could possibly apply to parents. If they don't, that's great. If they do, great, we'll get your feedback. So yeah, feel free to say what you would like to say about them.
I do have a question real quick. So when it says increase translation and language access, and you said that it's already provided in 3 languages, so are you going to be adding more languages like Mandarin and stuff, or are you just adding more translators to the languages we already have?
Actually, at this time, not all licensing materials or webinars are translated or have live interpreters in Spanish and Somali. So this recommendation is in response to like Deanna said, the presentations that the providers have received, and in discussing that these things aren't available, they made this recommendation that at least these 3 languages are included.
Thank you so much for the
Yeah,
clarification.
And I will say at the past 2 meetings of the subcommittee, the providers also were reviewing their own recommendations and providing additional feedback, because of course, these aren't finalized yet. The subcommittee still has time and time for more input, but I'm so sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was saying that the providers were providing feedback on this, and they have suggested even more languages than just the 3 that were suggested previously. Okay, thank you to whoever provided this feedback. I would recommend that there be a process where providers who don't speak any of those specified languages can request translated information and documents that the state will provide. Thank you. Oh, I see in the chat. Does the non-English access to information in webinars mean that they receive access to that information in their spoken language? Yes, Whitney, it does. Technically, the recommendation just refers to Spanish and Somali, but some of the feedback that providers have already provided is that it should be included in more. But this would just be like the standard, everything is released. And then on top of that, providers could potentially request additional languages based on the need. And then I see, how about a digital translation if possible? Great, thank you guys.
Hi, this is Nikki. So, sorry, I just had a question. So this is just to clarify, this is what the providers are getting as far as instructions for applying for these grants, right?
Yes, that could be part of it, but this recommendation refers to really anything that is released from the licensing division. So if there's a webinar on health guidelines, then that would be released in English, Spanish, and Somali. But
Oh,
also,
I see.
yes,
Okay.
grant applications, it would include grant applications and communications about grant applications, which
Oh, okay.
those typically do go out in those 3 languages. Correct, Deanna? I think most grant applications do typically already go out in those 3 languages. Yes.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Of course. A good question.
I have a question. This is Tiffany speaking. How is it handled for our community members who are parents that maybe use sign language or some other form? I was just curious.
For parents like who are seeking services or childcare.
Right, like if they're wanting to have things, because so I know it's like this is speaking about, you know, written communication, but what about for folks that written may not always be the, I guess, be the best communication channel? Does that ever come up?
Yeah, I was going to say, Tiffany, so Somali, for example, we've heard this a lot. Somali providers would prefer verbal translation. They do not, or not translation, sorry, interpretation. And they don't like to read translated materials in Somali. So we have definitely heard that. It has come up. And I would say it really depends on the team that you're dealing with when it comes to translation or interpretation, because each team in the agency does things differently. And some of them, our team in particular has had requests for other languages outside of these 3. And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, really, we in particular have we've never received a request for Somali translation. We've definitely received Spanish and then other languages. And that was mainly for interpretation. So right now there is no process to answer your question, and it's just depends. I know there is some internal work going on to try to create a more streamlined process to deal with any sort of requests across the board and make it more, make access easier for whatever language.
Yeah, I was wondering because it seems like things have, I don't know, I guess like shifted in our society where video seems to be a lot of, I guess what I've observed even in my own work, like the preferred communication mode. And so that's one of the things that I was curious about. Are other communication modes also being explored as ways to be able to connect and communicate with folk?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things, and I don't want to speak for the providers, but I think one of the biggest things that prompted this recommendation were that a lot of the webinars that that DCYF and the licensing division do are only in English. So providers who English isn't their first language or don't speak English don't necessarily have access to those webinars. And then I see there's a comment in the chat, ADA would require the state to provide information and webinars translated to accommodate for disabilities like ASL or Braille options. And yes, you can always request this information. It's just that I think sometimes people don't even know that they have the right to request it. So the recommendation is to kind of get out ahead of that. Anything else on this one, or we can move to the next page? Okay, so the next recommendation is around the Licensing Division Child Protective Services investigation process. And providers recommend that DCYF provides a redacted copy of the LD CPS allegation to providers when a complaint is made. And then we have some feedback in the document already. This seems very harmful to the parent-provider relationship. When people hear an allegation that might not be true, it can poison the view of that person. Providers should be able to spot actual abuse and are already mandated reporters. Oh, we should be more specific. This actually refers to when there is a CPS investigation about something that happened at a licensed childcare organization. So it doesn't necessarily refer to, if there was a child abuse allegation made on behalf of the child from someone outside of the licensed childcare. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I still get, like, even if I could see how it applies both ways to a degree. But I do think the redaction is key word here. For parents, the protection of parents, you know, to the notes in pink.
Oh, maybe I'm misunderstanding the comment. You're saying the comment still applies to providing a redacted copy to providers during an LD CPS investigation?
I'm just saying, like, if, let's say there's a CPS investigation going on that's related to the parent. So how I'm reading it is, obviously the comments in pink, the parent would not want that going to the childcare provider.
Gotcha.
Some of those, and so redacting the information so that the provider would only see what's related to the provider is relevant. And then to answer James, which part would be redacted? So typically redaction occurs when it has to do with anything that's outside of what the provider would need to know. So it depends. Like, for example, we will redact identifiable information before sharing it. So we would take out children's names, we would take out ages, things of that nature.
And then I also see in the chat, providers would need to know what type and who is at question. And as a parent, allegations get the same treatment as conviction. Does anyone else have any clarifying questions about this one? Sorry if I made it more confusing.
And that comment, you know, as a parent, allegations get the same treatment as conviction. I would say that providers would say that exact same thing. They would make the same comment. because as a provider, allegations get the same treatment as conviction for them as well, for their facility.
Okay, we can move on to the next page. And if you think of anything else you want to add, we can always jump back. Okay, so this next one is on eliminating overregulation, and the next couple will be on that as well. Eliminate unnecessary training and education requirements that do not align with staff compensation. DCYF should eliminate mandates that do not come with funding for providers, as this passes the cost on to families. Any clarifying questions about that recommendation? Does it bring anything up for you? Any feedback? This assumes that all necessary trainings will be funded, which is a budget issue. Yeah, if that first part is a question, I think that is the intention. And then, yeah, what type of mandates? I'm trying to think if I can come up with a good example of, does anything come to mind for you of an example, Deanna? I think it's more, well, I guess I can, okay, so maybe the CPR training. So recently, DCYF put out communication to providers, to licensed childcare providers, that providers need to start resuming in-person CPR training. I believe that was paused at some point during the pandemic, so they could just complete online training. And DCYF put out communication that they're going to be, that is going to be changing, and the in-person CPR training is required again. And it was backdated to sometime in April. So for providers who had just completed their CPR certification, we're going to have to redo their CPR certification. And that doesn't necessarily come with, DCYF doesn't necessarily pay providers back for the training that they already did.
Yeah, so basically we are requiring them to take training and pay for it on their own. And we're not compensating for that. So when initially they could do something online, right? And I think, and Emily, feel free to chime in if I'm incorrect with this, but there are some trainings and education requirements that don't apply to every teacher on site and staff and in a childcare center or family home. And so that's kind of where this came into play. Like some people, like at the director level, might need to take different trainings and requirements that others do not. And so eliminating those unnecessary training and education requirements to staff across the board, that would help some of the costs that trickle down to families. Yeah, Whitney, to your point, like just because it isn't funded doesn't mean it's not necessary. Like the CPR one, great example, because CPR, probably a necessary training that everyone should have, no matter what position you're in. And I guess one could argue, should that be paid for by the individual, or should it be paid for by the employer? Should it be paid for by the state? So it's just a lot of questions. That's just one example. Obviously, there's many others.
And I see another piece of feedback in the chat. Child care centers don't adequately serve kids with disabilities, often because they have no idea how to accommodate those kids. There needs to be more training around those types of issues, whether it is funded by the state or not, as a matter of inclusion and equity. There must be many topic areas like that. The real issue is the fact that the state doesn't want to fund it.
Tiffany, go ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment about, what the state doesn't want to fund, because what I find interesting about this is that the title is looking at actually over-regulation. And yet when you actually look at, I'm going to say, the strategy that's been applied to the results is really kind of going, it's about money, it's about budgeting. And so I just think it's really interesting that it's about over-regulation, but we're really looking at this budgeting aspect instead of getting to like, what's the essence or the essentials behind this? And I think that's something worth pulling out. Because if we're about over-regulation, then I don't know if my strategy wouldn't necessarily be focused, honestly, from like a straight budgetary lens, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I would say, like, there's other ones under this title, the regulation piece. We obviously did not pull all of them for you all to look at, because a lot of them don't apply to parents in particular, but this one, we definitely felt like, because it talks about costs, trickling down to the families, then that's why we put it in here.
Thank you for that clarification. That helps actually in understanding kind of the large bucket.
I think it depends on what somebody's definition of overregulation or unnecessary is, because I'd rather pay more to somebody who knows, whose whole staff knows CPR, and maybe they took 2 classes, but I'd much rather have somebody that did it hands-on than somebody that did it online. But I mean, there might be something that somebody requires that maybe is unnecessary, but I think it's like, what is that definition? What are these things? And who decides if they're necessary? Is it put to the parents? Hey, do you feel this is necessary for somebody watching your kid?
Yeah, thank you for that, Alina. That's a really good point. Oh, and then I see in the chat, I'm generally of the mindset that there should be more training for providers. And then Whitney said exactly to Alina's comment.
Yeah, I agree with both of with what's being said, because I know, like, my mother-in-law, she's a CODA, and she's required to do, continuously take certain trainings every year to keep her certification, and she does have to pay out of pocket for a lot of it, and sometimes that's difficult. But I don't think it's a matter of these aren't trainings that she doesn't need. I feel like, what everyone else is saying, a lot of times more training probably is needed, and it's more of a, they need the funding. They need for it to be paid for, not for it to not be required, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the second page of eliminate overregulation. And again, if you've come up with anything else, go ahead and put it in the chat or just ask us to jump back a page, no big deal. And this next one that the providers recommended is that providers are notified that a licensing visit will take place within 30 to 60 days. Good question, Stephanie. Are they notified at all now? No, the visits are completely unannounced. And part of that comes from federal language for the Child Care Development Fund, that the federal government requires that the state, if you're receiving CCDF funding, which DCYF does, that licensing visits be unannounced. Providers are recommending that licensing visits are still unannounced, but that they are given a window of time. And some of the comments behind this have been, especially for family home providers, that they really don't want to be out on vacation when this licensing visit happens, and that could happen right now. And some other providers feel like they want to be there when the licensing visit happens, and they don't want their staff to feel nervous or like they don't have their supervisor there. Can you explain the reasoning for adding the notice? Does that make sense, Whitney? Is that enough explanation? I can try to go a little more in depth if you guys have more questions. Okay, great. Okay, and they should stay that way. As a parent, this is a no. Thank you, Alina. So you're saying that you want them to stay completely unannounced. That makes you feel more comfortable as a...
Yes, ma'am. I don't want them to get notice and then be perfect for 30 to 60 days, every time they're told it's going to happen, and then go to what when they know it's not going to happen for a while. I'm not okay with that. I'd rather it stay unannounced. They know it's going to happen eventually.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
If they're going to go on vacation or something, they can call them and say, hey, I'm going on vacation from this date to this date, and that's that,
Thank you, Alina. Christina, did you have something to add?
I agree with Alina. I don't think that it should be announced. So like if you have, let's say, and I know this is different, if you have housing, right? Like they just send you a letter in the mail that, oh, your inspection is on this date, or they show up unannounced. That's just how it is. Like Alina said, like, oh, they have 30 to 60 days to be all perfect and, do things the right way. And then what happens when those providers, or not the providers, but the people that are inspecting are gone, right? Like, I don't think that they should be given a window. And that's from a parent's point of view. And I've said that before when we were doing the negotiated rulemaking. Like, I don't think that that's acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, you are absolutely welcome to and encouraged to say whatever your feedback is on these recommendations, even if you disagree. Your feedback is very important and required for these recommendations. So thank you for everything you guys are sharing. And I also see there should be announced and unannounced checks. When you have unannounced, they are unprepared, which can provide insight. Yes, thank you, James. Anything else on this one? Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so 2 recommendations on this slide. Oh, one more. If the concern is being on vacation, etc., language should be added so that they can call. Okay, so yes, let's go back to back a page and then add the comment that, yeah, Alina.
Sorry, I finished that really quickly because you were like, oh, let's move on. And I was typing. What I mean is there should be some sort of language added where the provider can then call and say, hey, our facility is going to be closed from this date to this date. So if you were planning, anything, we won't be there and it will be closed. Whatever their thing is, whether it's a vacation, whether it's, something going on and they had some sort of issue and they need to deal with that. There should be language that they can communicate then with the inspectors and let them know.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. So they, maybe it won't be announced, but you can say, please don't come within this day because I'm going to be out on vacation and we won't be here.
Right, exactly. And then they have a little bit more, comfort there where they'll be like, well, they're not going to show up while we're on vacation because we were able to, let them know that, that, or our place flooded and we're dealing with, disaster response or something, whatever it is that that will give them that security that they're not going to show up when they're trying to deal with something like that, but it will still keep us parents more comfortable that it's still going to be surprise visits that are not told to them.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so providers also recommended that violations are separated against, there are separate violations against an individual, so an employee, from true violations or complaints against the facility. And then ensure that that staff members' full names are not listed in child care check to protect employee privacy. And we can just do that one first and then move on to the second one. Are there any clarifying questions about that one?
What is childcare check?
Childcare check is one, Deanna, you may have to jump in on this one. It is one of the systems that shows a bunch of different information about childcare, a childcare organization, like who owns it, I think potentially their capacity, and it could also have violations that have been made, either founded by licensing or complaints that have been made against employees that work for the organization.
Yeah, so there's a website parents and families can go to look for childcare in their area, and you can see reports that have been made against a center or family home, any licensed childcare facility. So a lot of times, I know the owners' full names are listed on the website. I have not been on it in a little while to check multiples if like all staff are listed on it. But that's kind of what they're saying is, I mean, this could run into if somebody wants to get employment and then their full name is listed, that definitely comes up. But then to me and Emily, maybe I'm wrong here, these two statements kind of feel like they could almost be separated apart.
Mm-hmm.
So are we saying
the first sentence versus second? Go ahead.
Sorry, are we saying that a staff member who has an allegation or something, like, so we're not having their full names out there to protect their privacy? Is that what that's saying?
No.
No.
Yeah, what Deanna was saying is true. They could really be, these two sentences could really be separate recommendations. It's not necessarily saying to protect the privacy of someone who may have had a complaint made against them. It's more so that The concern that I remember when this was brought up was that if an employee is just listed on the childcare website, like Deanna was saying, we're not, it might not be happening for every organization, but if every single teacher is listed, there could be a concern that maybe, or every single staff member, not just teacher, that maybe someone doesn't want that information out there because they don't want their full name listed, because they may have been in a domestic violence relationship, or they just, have personal beliefs that they just don't want their full name listed somewhere. It is not necessarily to protect the privacy of someone who is accused of a violation.
So I would say, schools have full names of staff members. Lots and lots of places, especially state places, have full names. So I don't really see why it would be different for a childcare facility. You're in charge of kids and their safety. You're getting state funding. Your name could be out there.
Right. And I think what they're saying is, like directors, owners, their names are listed. And I would have to go look on the website again. But the last time I was on there, that's the only names I saw. I did not see all staff. I was particularly looking at this one center and I did not see all their staff listed. However, I wasn't digging for that. I was mainly looking for just violations or complaints related to that actual center. So in that regard, like if we take these two apart and look at like the first sentence, separate violations that are against an individual from true violation, separate violations that are against an individual or employee from violations or complaints against the facility. So that's the first recommendation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions about this one.
No, you're fine.
So if we separate the violations against an individual from the facility, I feel like I'm kind of going to want to know if a facility is employing people who keep getting violations. Might not be a violation against the center itself, but if we have 5 employees over a period of time who have violated, you know what I mean? So I don't see.
I think what their thing was, like, a lot of times, let's say something happens with a staff person, right, an employee, and then the facility finds out about it, they let that employee go. And so then they're still held accountable. It's at their site, but that person is gone and it doesn't carry with that person. So that person can go to another facility, get employed. It doesn't follow them. But the center or the family home still has the complaint, but that individual does not. So even if they go to another facility, right, you don't know that that person has a complaint or violation against them necessarily.
Okay. So I would say both then. I'd say that separate it and keep it. The facility should still have a complaint that's tracked, and that individual should have the complaint that's tracked. We need more tracking.
Thank you, Stephanie. Eileen, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to say there should be a way, basically, to prove that they did their due diligence in, searching out that person. It should definitely be attached to the employee, and go on their personal record so that people can find that. And then, if a company hires them knowing that they have multiple, allegations, over several agencies, they should then be also held accountable. So I agree with it should be both and, but, obviously if it's the first time and they had no idea these people were going to do this, then I don't want to, harm the agency, just if they knew what they were hiring, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And then I see in the chat, Whitney agreed it should be a both and. And why doesn't the violation get attached to their record for when they move centers or jobs? And wouldn't this information get pulled as part of a background check? So if there was an actual founded child abuse or neglect case against an employee, that would. This would be more for things like they violated licensing rules, correct, Deanna? So yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't go in the background check unless it's, a finding. And it has to elevate enough to be a finding that actually is reported to a background check level. And not all of these are. So to go to that second part, because we were kind of talking about the first sentence, right? So the second sentence, which I know we've already kind of talked about, like I think I'm hearing that ensure staff members' full names are not listed in childcare check to protect employee privacy. But you all are saying, no, they should be listed, just like school district and things of that nature, correct? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to clarify to make sure that we're hearing it accurately before we move.
I do think we should find some way to protect somebody. Let's say they do come with domestic violence background. There should be some way to protect that person, you know. But again, I want to know who's got my kid.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know all the people around my kid.
Thank you for that, Alina. So many other jobs list their staff members, and we're talking about people working with a very vulnerable population. Great, thank you, Whitney.
I want to say, one of the things that scares me is I'm one of those people that listens to a lot of true crime. And there was this story recently about these gals that were in this pregnancy due date group, and they were all really good friends, and they used to send each other Christmas cards and birthday cards and all this stuff. They'd send each other presents and stuff. And then all of a sudden one day somebody posted, you don't really know who people are online. And everybody's like, what the heck? What's going on? I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Carla Haroka, but she's not a nice person. And she was one of the people on this site with a whole new name. She murdered her sister with her boyfriend, repeatedly raped her, and then went on to have kids and said, well, I changed my name because I wanted to just, have a normal life. That's the kind of thing I want to know if it's around my kids. So yeah, that's scary,
Yeah, that sounds very scary. The unknown can be really frightening. Staff at our hospital have the option of only having first names on our name badge for safety concerns. Thanks, Tammy. So you're saying kind of like when they're at the facility, there can be protections, but online or on childcare check, full names are still best.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know that at the hospital we've had, not for me because I'm old and not really cute anymore, but these young nurses are young and cute, and they've had patients find their look them up and go to their home and call them and stalk them. So usually it happens with the really young and young nurses, but it doesn't happen with me. But that's for that safety concern. I see why somebody wouldn't want to have their full name.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then how about just using their initials? Thanks, James. I see both sides. And it's okay to not come to a consensus right now, for sure, because there's still time, and we will likely, if not actually at the September meeting, there'll be some communication that might go out to you all if there are new recommendations related to parents as well. So today is not necessarily the end of providing feedback on this. So we have 2 more recommendations to go through. So let's move to the next one. Oh, nope, sorry, Jessica, I just meant on the same page. Thank you, though. Separation between providers accepting subsidy and private pay organizations. Remove the early childhood education requirements, lower the number of years required to receive an employment waiver. Early learning organizations who do not take any CCDF funding should be exempt from education requirements of their teachers. So this refers to childcares that do not accept subsidy. And I do just want to preface before we start having the conversation, in the recent meetings that providers have had, there has been disagreement on this recommendation. Are there any clarifying questions, or does it bring any reactions from you guys?
I have a question. So is that saying that folks that accept the subsidy will have different requirements than those who do not?
Correct. That would
Okay.
be the result if this recommendation were to be put forth and accepted.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I know, like, for very wealthy places like hospitals that do not accept Medicaid and only they don't have to go through all the JACO requirements that most hospitals in this country do that accept Medicare and Medicaid.
Is it all the same now? Like, are all the requirements the same now?
Yes. Who will this benefit primarily? What type of facilities? I think this could probably be answered a couple different ways depending on how you feel about the recommendation. But I would say that if by benefit you mean have less requirements, that would be organizations that are private pay, who gets less out of their training. Okay. Organizations who only accept private pay children. So organizations that do not accept children or families who are receiving subsidy to pay to cover the cost of childcare would, if they did not accept those types of families, they would have less training requirements and education requirements. Did I say that backwards?
Yeah, so the facilities that are receiving subsidy, they're saying should be exempt from the education requirements of their teachers. Right?
No,
Wait,
my understanding of the
recommendation. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding of the recommendation is that organizations that are private pay only would be let out of certain requirements that organizations that accept families who receive subsidy. And so I see, and what population do those kids, excuse me, and what population of kids do those facilities serve? So wealthy families. Yes, families that have more money and are able to cover private pay. That's who it would refer to. I think all children deserve educated teachers. I agree.
So
It should all be the same.
Early learning organizations who do not take any funding should be exempt. So wouldn't that, because that means it's less training that they're required, right? So wouldn't that encourage more daycares, more facilities to not take funding? So that would be less opportunity for people that need a subsidy.
That's correct, Nikki. That's one of the disagreements that has been stated about this recommendation is that it might incentivize providers to turn away families who receive subsidy.
Right.
Tiffany?
So I guess one of the things my mind is sitting at is I'm thinking about the larger outcome. If we're thinking about thinking about our children, right, as a whole, not just like my child, but thinking about everyone's child, like if they're my child, and no matter whose child it is or the resources, like as a state, like what's the at least the minimum standard that we're wanting to establish, right? And so that's the thing that my mind is thinking or pondering over is if we're saying this group of folks are exempt, right? And we're thinking that's because I'm not sure the reasons, but maybe because they have access to more resources. At the end of the day, what's the minimum standard we're really trying to establish for our kids, period? So when it comes to their teachers, going back to what one of their parents said, you wanting your staff to be educated, regardless of where that child is, I think there needs to be a minimum standard of expectation around the folks that are literally raising up, helping to establish that foundation for our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, Tiffany. That was well said. Alina agrees with that. And Tammy added that it's already difficult to find childcare with the subsidy. And I could see centers opting out of subsidy payments, which in turn hurts the most vulnerable kids or the families who can't afford private pay. Christina agrees. Yeah, okay, so it sounds like you are all on the same page about disagreeing with this recommendation. Great, thank you. Anything else to add on this one before we move to the final recommendation? Okay, we'll go ahead. DCYF will make all provider feedback available and address what feedback was taken into account, what feedback was not, and why. Providers have the right to understand how their input is being used or not being used by DCYF. Available to whom? To the public, particularly the people who made the feedback. So I think the intention is posted to the website or sent out some way. I see you unmuted, Deanna. Feel free to add.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. So like an example for this is like these meetings, right? So you all are providing DCYF feedback right now. Parents are providing feedback to DCYF. So how are we utilizing that feedback? What feedback to this, putting this into perspective, what feedback from tonight was taken into account? What feedback was not and why? And parents have the right to understand how their input is being used or not being used by DCYF. So what providers are asking are, a lot of times the agency will say, well, we spoke with providers. And so particularly, we have a subcommittee of providers and they'll ask, who did you talk to? Well, we talked with providers. We talked to different groups. Well, when did you talk to them? Who did you talk to? What date? Where was the agenda? Where's the notes from that meeting? Really, that's what they're wanting is just accountability so that DCYF can't just say, I talked to providers, but they're not saying who and when. So it's kind of like if they got parent input, you all would say, when did you talk to parents? I mean, we are a parent advisory body to the agency. You didn't come talk to us. Which parents did you talk to? When did you talk to them? I want to see their input. the date you talked to them, just so we can see like what questions did you ask, because we would have liked to provide feedback on that. So that's kind of what they're saying here with this recommendation.
And then I see in the chat, so I could Google a center and find all the feedback from licensing. No, the intention isn't necessarily that the feedback would be like searchable or discoverable by who made the feedback. It would be not necessarily anonymous, because a lot of the meetings are recorded and posted, but it would really be just that they would see what happened to the feedback that was given. Either it was taken into account and these changes are made, or the feedback wasn't taken into account for this reason. That it wouldn't necessarily say, you know, which organization provided that feedback. People providing feedback or volunteering their time, effort, and experience. Really, feedback sessions should be compensated, but if they are not, at the very least that can be done as the action or inaction following feedback is described. Yeah, thank you, Whitney. And I think I missed your comment up above too. If people are going to take their time to provide feedback, the state should at least take the time to provide that explanation. Thank you. And Alina says this makes sense. Love more accountability on DCYF decision making. Love this idea if it's fully done and not cherry picked to suit DCYF in a positive way. That's a great point. Yeah, and James, instead of using the whole name of someone, how about their first name and last initial only? For example, James O after what they said. That's a good point. And you know, different teams can do things different ways. Typically, our team, and I would say the majority, maybe Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but we typically don't attach any names to feedback, just because, you know, the state doesn't need to know, or not that we don't need to know, but it's not really important who says it, right? It was said at a stakeholder meeting. So the important thing is that the comment was made. But that is a good point for privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some teams that definitely track who said what, but like in our meetings, we record all our meetings, so we don't need to try. I mean, if we really want to go back and see who said it, we definitely can. But we believe, like, if one person is saying it, they're not the only person, the only parent that thinks this way. There's going to be others that actually agree with that comment. So that's kind of how we operate as a group. And I would say most of DCYF that we've seen and participated with would operate that same way.
Any other feedback or input on this? And as we typically do, we will send this Jamboard link out with the follow-up email in case, you know, later on this evening or tomorrow you think of something you'd like to add. But Jessica, if you want to go ahead and pull up the Mentimeter presentation again, we can get a little bit more feedback on this meeting and then let you guys enjoy the rest of your evening with your families. So back to Mentimeter. If you don't want to use the Mentimeter, that's completely fine. But if you would like a quick little tutorial, it works better on Google Chrome. So you can either copy paste the link that Jessica put in the chat into Google Chrome, or you can go use your phone and go to your browser and type in www.menti.com and then enter the code that's at the top of the screen, which for today's meeting is 8081 4047. And it'll also bring up this this presentation. Okay, we can go to the next one. We got another word cloud because we love word clouds. Share one or more words describing how you're feeling walking away from today's meeting. hopeful. Thank you, Christina. Thoughtful. Heard, helpful. You guys are always very helpful. Okay, and we can move on to the closing slide. Just let us know when our next meeting is, September 22nd. So thank you everybody for all of your time tonight and meeting with us.
Yeah, thank you all. I know people were bummed about not meeting in person, and it's been a rough go at trying to get an in-person meeting together. So we're still working on that, and we will continue to work on that. So for all of you that are excited to meet back in person, we haven't given up to do that. But yeah, so thank you all for still continuing to join us virtually. We appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody.
No
Bye.
worries, Tammy.